It's day 2 of the federal government shutdown, and the impact is being felt across the state of Florida. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media on Thursday, October 2nd, 2025. I'm Sharon Stone. 47,000 federal employees in Central Florida are working without pay or furloughed on temporary leave because the federal government is shut down. Congress did not pass a funding deal before the October 1st deadline. Many government agencies are required to stop operations because there's no money authorized for them to operate. Essential workers like the TSA agents you see must show up even though they won't get paid until the shutdown is over. Many employee unions are calling on Congress to end the shutdown immediately so their federal workers and their families don't pay the price. We're speaking with Central Florida elected officials on both sides of the aisle about why this is happening and what it will take to end the standoff. But first, let's talk to someone on the ground living through this again. John Hubert is the American Federation of Government Employees local president representing TSA workers in Florida. He's one of the essential workers still showing up to work because airports in the state can't afford for him not to.
The workforce is scared to death to say anything. They are worried about their finances during a shutdown, how detrimental it could be. I had a member call me yesterday telling me that they won't pay their rent because they know it's going to be a shutdown. So that's something that you have to think about now because they don't know if they're going to be paid. They don't know how long the shutdown is going to go this time. Because it looks like both sides are at odds. And in that interim, the federal workforce always suffers. We're the ones just waiting on the sideline. We continue to do our job, and we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know when we're going to get paid. We don't know when the government is going to come back. They're going to do a continuing resolution, whatever. But we're very worried about what's happening. I sense the fear of the members. They don't know what's going to happen. There's been threats that, if you don't show up to work, you may be terminated. Obviously, we don't believe in that kind of stuff, but, it's out there. So people are scared if they don't come to work, they'll be removed, things like that. So, it's one of those type of things. There's a lot of uncertainty going around.
I know this isn't your first encounter with a government shutdown. And during the 35-day shutdown, 2018 to 2019, you were helping other TSA workers getting essentials going to food banks. Is there anything different this time, or does this feel like deja vu? Are you planning differently?
No, I'm not planning differently. As a matter of fact, I am planning and anticipating a long shutdown because of the political climate that's going on right now. It doesn't seem that, nobody's willing to step in one direction. And in the middle of that, since our jobs, by virtue of being a federal employee, we have to wait because Congress actually controls the person, controls our paychecks. So we really need them to get everything together and make sure to come up with something. So we are paid because the regular American citizen and a regular American worker doesn't understand why wouldn't you get paid? Yeah, we don't get paid until Congress decides to pay us. So it's very stressful. And I'm trying to explain that to our family members, the uncertainty. And we just have to keep our head up and we have to keep on going. So
when we're talking about TSA and air traffic controllers and agents, are you all considered essential? Would the expectation be for you to go to work and not get paid?
Yes, the TSA workforce is considered essential workforce. So we have to come into work regardless of the situation if there is a shutdown. Now, obviously, everybody has personal issues going on, but it's something that we have to do during a shutdown. And it's very difficult to be able to do that when you're not certain if you're going to get your next paycheck.
Who do you hold responsible for this impasse? What would you say to those elected representatives on the Hill?
I would say to the elected officials on the Hill, although we're not as well off as them, but they still have to understand that we're Americans and we need their help. We need them to just do their job and pay us what we deserve. We can't continue to come to work without pay. That's impossible. So we need the federal government and we need Congress to act and vote for us to get for our paychecks. We show up no matter what. We're there when you need us to fulfill all the functions as the federal workforce. So why aren't you there for us when we need to get paid? And you said it's essential, Well, how come it's not essential for us to be paid?
Are you getting any guidance from the federal government?
Every agency is doing it a little different. The VA is doing it different from Social Security. TSA is doing it different from the Bureau of Prisons. So it's a lot of different agencies, a lot of different guidance going on out there, and people are very confused because for the most part, they're very uncertain and they're fearful, that something could happen in the interim. They could probably lose their job, and that's always a concern.
John, how do you talk about this with your family?
Well, my family's been through a couple of shutdowns already, and they pretty much know around what time of year, which is crazy. My kids know what time of year they vote on the fiscal budget, and my kids are very young, but yeah, my family already knows that we just have to grind and we just have to keep on doing what we need to do. I prepare as much as I possibly can for anticipation of not being paid. So I'm good for maybe a month or two. After that, it's going to become very difficult to be able to maintain my mortgage, my payments for my gas bill, my light bill, my car bill, my insurance. It just compounds and everything compounds, and nobody cares about your situation as a federal employee. As a matter of fact, they were giving out furlough notices a long time ago to give to your landlords and stuff like that. I mean, that doesn't carry much weight when they want their money. So at the end of the day, I just hope Congress does their job and gets the federal workforce paid. That's all we need. We just need you to do what you say that we're essential or we're essential workers is essential to pay us also. I thought the federal workforce was supposed to be the standard of employment of this country, but now it has turned to a political issue. And I think that the American public needs to know that the same people you see every single day that have to go to work every single day like you are federal employees too.
AFGE local president John Hubert represents TSA workers in Florida. The Greater Orlando Aviation Authority that manages the Orlando International and Orlando Executive Airports says that regular operations will continue, and they hope for a resolution soon. The Senate is scheduled to vote again tomorrow on a short-term resolution passed by the U.S. House of Representatives to fund the government for 7 weeks while Congress works on a budget deal. The plan did not pass Wednesday. That vote fell largely along party lines, though one Republican did vote against the bill, while 3 Democrats broke with their party, voting in favor. Healthcare is the issue here. Democrats want Republicans to reverse Medicaid cuts in President Trump's bill passed this summer and to extend the tax credits to make health insurance more affordable through the Affordable Care Act. Those credits that were put in place during the COVID pandemic will expire at the end of the year if Congress doesn't extend them. Republicans say keeping the government open should be the priority, and they can negotiate health care later. Some members of the GOP claim Democrats want to give free health care to people in the country illegally. Immigrants living in the U.S. without legal status are not eligible for federal health care programs like Medicare or Medicaid. Some immigrants who aren't citizens, like green card or visa holders, or those granted asylum, can qualify depending on their situation. Senators return tomorrow to vote on the House's 7-week stopgap. U.S. Representative Mike Herodopoulos is the Republican House member representing Brevard County and the communities around the Space Coast. I spoke to him yesterday. Democrats are holding out for an extension for a tax credit applicable towards the ACA premiums. Your Republican colleagues are saying Democrats are providing ACA benefits for undocumented residents. We know that is not a provision of the bill, and illegal immigrants are not eligible for ACA benefits. Help me understand, where is the impasse?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, let's take one step back. Right now, as you know, in order to keep the government open, we need a majority of the votes in the United States House of Representatives. That has been achieved. And now it's over in the Senate in order to keep the government open. And we're, of course, a few votes short at this time. Only 3 Democrats have voted for it. You probably need 6 or 7 or 8 Democrats to actually keep the government open. And that's the continuing resolution, or CR, is just simply saying we're going to continue spending the money we have been throughout the year until we can come up with an actual budget deal. And that was acceptable to Democrats back in March. Of course, right now, they're choosing not to, which I think is a shame, because I think we should keep the government open. The second part of your question, of course, is about illegal aliens getting benefits. Well, that's something that, of course, we're going to talk about in the overall budget. But to keep the government open, we think we want to just continue on the current spending pattern. There's no additions to it. It's just simply continuing on what we did back in March. Finally, to your point, I know there's been a lot of debate about this idea of illegal aliens getting health care. You don't have to take my word for it, but if you talk with the governor of California or you talk with the governor of New York, both Democrats, they readily admit that they do provide health care to illegal aliens. And that's well documented. We'd be happy to send you over some of the stories where they affirm that position. And as you know, probably from because I follow healthcare very closely. My wife's actually a medical doctor. Should an illegal alien go into the hospital under EMTALA, which is basically they must serve a person coming into the hospital. Eventually, of course, the federal government will reimburse people or hospitals for emergency care. So it's a debate we're going to have, but I think the bigger picture is let's keep the government open and then have some of these policy debates as we get closer and closer to the new year.
When we're looking at this current standoff, partly being over healthcare spending, Central Florida has a large and growing retiree population. What would you say to the seniors here?
It is important. I couldn't agree with you more that seniors, the disabled, children of low-income parents, pregnant women, they should all be on Medicaid. And that's what we affirmed in the bill. But we want to make sure the people who are able-bodied get back into the workforce, or those people who no longer qualify for Medicaid under their current income are taken off the roll so we can help the most needy.
Can you speak to what efforts are being made now, today, through the end of the week, to meet with House Democrats to find some kind of compromise, given that it is shut down?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, we in the House are kind of paralyzed in the sense that we've already voted on the bill. We had a vote. Every Republican, except for one or two, voted for the bill. One Democrat actually voted with us to keep the government open. At this point, there doesn't seem like there is a compromise. But let's just be clear here. This is not the long-term solution. This is simply a 7-week kind of cover so that we can meet our bills come due to the United States government. We're just simply saying, hey, in order to keep the government open, we need 7 more weeks to try to negotiate these very important issues you and I are discussing right now. But there's a difference between the budget and making sure that people who have already paid taxes get the services they deserve, and a policy decision that we need to make with issues like health care.
Regarding the Space Coast, you're chair of the Space Subcommittee. Can you speak to me about how the impact could impact Kennedy Space Center operations?
Yeah, that's a fair question. And it's one of the first things I was concerned about. And I've spoken to the leadership of NASA. The big mission coming up for NASA, of course, is Artemis 2. It will take place in the spring of next year, at least late spring, that being February through April. And that is right on target. I have talked to the leadership at NASA. It is vital that we keep Artemis 2 in place. Not only is Artemis 2, but Artemis 3 will be unaffected by these changes. And as you probably know from the big bill passed in July, we actually added $10 billion to NASA's budget to help meet those needs in the short and long term. So they are funded. Regardless of this current budget fight, the money is there. We are moving forward in a positive way. And as you probably also know, it's not just NASA, but also the private sector is heavily involved in our space industry. So you have Blue Origin, and more specifically, where most of the launches are taking place with SpaceX. Those are going moving forward as planned. And you have other companies like Airbus, ULA, and others who are, again, moving forward because a lot of those programs have already been funded. It's not being impacted by the latest discussions we're having with the current budget shutdown or government shutdown due to the budget.
I spoke to a Florida federal worker, and he said, quote, people are scared to death. They're scrambling. They're trying to prioritize their bills. And many people live paycheck to paycheck. What do you say to those people in the district who are facing this disruption in that pay schedule?
Every federal government employee, if they're considered essential, of course, they're still at work. If they're considered non-essential, they do not go to work. But one of the provisions within these government shutdown rules are when we do open back up, they get their back pay. This is why we should open it up as quickly as possible for two reasons. One is I don't want to disrupt anybody living paycheck to paycheck, and two, you remember the people, meaning the taxpayers, have paid for these services. They deserve to get these services because they paid taxes. So this is why I would implore Democrat members to vote to open up the government so that we don't have this, let's just say, intermission or stop, because nobody wins.
You're representing a district on the east coast of Florida during hurricane season. Should Central Floridians be concerned about how a shutdown could impact FEMA or NOAA or the agencies that are responsible for storm response?
Well, let's all hope, first of all, with the streak continues, we do not have a major storm. But that said, yeah, of course, we're prepared for that. Florida is the best in the country at it. So the quicker we get this thing settled, we get back to negotiating the very things you and I discussed today, the better off everyone will be.
Republican Congressman Mike Herodopoulos' district includes Brevard, Indian River, and parts of Orange County. Central Florida Public Media reached out to NASA for an update on the shutdown. According to NASA Communications, a little more than 82% of workers nationwide are furloughed. We have not yet been able to independently confirm the status of local employees. While the GOP blames Democrats for the shutdown, the Dems see it differently and blame Republicans. U.S. Congressman Maxwell Frost represents Orlando. I asked him why he and other Democrats aren't supporting the 7-week short-term funding plan and what he's hearing from people in his district during the shutdown.
This is about ensuring that people in our districts and working families across the country don't get letters that tell them that their health insurance is going up anywhere from 50 to 300%. This is about making sure that 17 million Americans don't get kicked off of their health insurance in the next year. And this is about the fact that this president and this Congress, led by Republicans, have put forth a funding bill that will ensure that people pay more for their health care and in many cases lose their health care. The Republicans run the Senate, they run the White House, and they run the House of Representatives. If they want to pass an evil bill meant to enrich billionaires on their own, then they should do that. But the issue is that they can't. And we're not going to vote to screw over our own constituents. And so that's why we're in the middle of this Trump shutdown. And it's really disgraceful and just shows that this administration doesn't care about the working people of this country. We hope this comes to an end soon. We're here to negotiate a bill that's actually going to not take away healthcare from working people. But the president's too busy tweeting out AI racist memes of Democrats. So we'll see what happens. But that's where we're at right now.
Where are you willing to make concessions?
We want to make sure people have health care and that their premiums don't go up. And so that's our main issue right now.
Is that a line in the sand that you will not cross?
It is a line in the sand we won't cross. And here's the other thing that is important to talk about when we're talking about negotiations. This is an administration that has completely ignored the law left and right. There have been negotiations, bills have been passed, and then the administration just does whatever they want. They X out the things in the bill that they don't like anyway. So we're here to talk, but even while we're talking, it's important to know that this is a group of people who don't care about the law. And it's, what is the incentive to be complicit in funding a lawless government when we have no assurances that the president's going to follow the law?
What are you hearing from your constituents in Orange and Lake counties in Central Florida?
People are upset. They're upset that prices are not going down. They're upset that they see a lawless government that is using the federal government to target political enemies. They're upset about the fact that their health insurance premiums will probably go up and many of them will be kicked off their health insurance. And they're proud to see somebody standing up and fighting on their behalf. And that's what we're doing in this moment.
And what would you say to those people, those constituents who say to you, or if they had the chance to say it to you, they need this paycheck to live day to day and they cannot afford a shutdown?
The federal employees that Donald Trump and his own administration have said they want to be terrorized. They want to terrorize them so much and traumatize them so much that they leave the federal government on their own. I understand what our federal workers are going through. And in fact, It was the federal worker unions that sent a letter to Democrats earlier this week that said, we want you to stand strong on this. We know what is going to happen to our workers. At the end of the day, we have to take a stand for healthcare in this country. That's what federal workers unions told us. And so I completely understand. But what I would tell them is this. This is the fault of the people in charge of the government. Donald Trump, the Republicans run the White House, the Republicans run the Senate. And they should be able to fund the government they want. And if they need Democratic help, they're going to have to come to the table and not put a bill forward that's going to take away health care from Americans across the country. And I think our federal workers really understand that. And it's very sad we're even in this situation. You know when the last government shutdown was? It was in the Trump administration. This is something that's very normal for this guy. He doesn't know how to run the country, and he doesn't know how to work with others, and he's breaking the law left and right. And so we're here to take a stand.
When we're looking at the impacts to people here in Central Florida, we have 2 more months left in hurricane season. Should they be concerned about any impacts to NOAA, NWS, or FEMA?
They should be concerned because, number one, even before the shutdown, Donald Trump fired many scientists, meteorologists, people who help us get our weather forecasts to make sure that we're safe here. So even before the shutdown, there was cause to be concerned. Even before the shutdown, our governor used the Florida Department of Emergency Management to build an internment camp in the middle of the Everglades that was ordered to be shut down, and now it's going to go back and forth in court, and spent upwards of almost $300 million of money supposed to be used to keep us safe during hurricanes for political reasons to cage immigrants in the Everglades. So people should be concerned, not just because of the shutdown, but because of what the administration and our governor have been doing to undermine hurricane preparedness and to keep us safe in a hurricane season that has been getting worse year after year after year.
Congressman Herodopoulos told us that the House passed a 7-week stopgap to fund the government while negotiations continue and keep it open, and he's blaming Democrats for holding it up. What's the downside of that approach of keeping the government open if it avoids disruptions for Central Floridians?
It means that people's health insurance is going to go up anywhere from 50 to 300%, and they're receiving the letters now. And to some Congress people and people like the Speaker and the President, they're pretty out of touch, and it's hard for them to completely understand why even just receiving that letter that tells you your health insurance is going up 100%, how that for working families changes their lives. I mean, in that moment, they might have to get less food at the grocery store for the next 3 months because they have to pay more for health insurance next year. Maybe they have to move and go somewhere else because they have to pay more for health insurance next year. Maybe they have to cancel the trip to go see grandparents because they have to pay more for health insurance next year. The Speaker of the House said himself in the meeting that taking care of healthcare is an extraneous issue and we should deal with it at the end of the year. That's not fair to working people in this country. We're sent to Congress to do a job. And the fact that Congressman Herodopoulos and Republicans in Congress want to kick the can down the road instead of figuring it out right now, my question is, well, there's people going to work every day in our districts who don't get to kick the can down the road for when they need to clock in for work. So clock in.
You spoke to me about having drawn a line in the sand. The White House is messaging Republican lawmakers to stand their ground. Help me understand what's next. How do you get beyond politics?
The president needs to tell the Speaker, go to the Democrats, negotiate a solution that's not going to ensure that health care goes up 50 to 300% for millions of Americans and that 17 million Americans aren't kicked off their health care in the next year. And then they'll find probably enough Democrats to get through and strike a deal. And that's what comes next. The people who run the government need to figure out the way to move forward.
Democratic Congressman Maxwell Frost represents Orlando. We want to hear from you and share your voice. If you're on furlough or are an essential employee, let us know how you're dealing with the shutdown. Send an email to engage@cfpublic.org. Before we move on, I want to tell you about an important change to public media. As of yesterday, NPR and member stations like Central Florida Public Media are now operating without federal funding support for the first time in more than 50 years. But our mission continues to connect and empower our region through trustworthy, independent journalism and thoughtful conversations. That is a responsibility I take very seriously as the host of Engage. We are still here because of you, our audience, our community. Central Florida Public Media's strength comes from your support, and we will keep showing up for you. Next on Engage, libraries being abandoned at public schools. Why they're disappearing, and who is trying to turn the page to keep the doors open for students.
There's a lot going on in space, from efforts to land astronauts on the moon
and liftoff of Artemis 1
to answering the age-old question, are we alone in the universe?
Wouldn't you want to know if there was life on another planet?
Are We There Yet? Explores space exploration every Tuesday at 6:30 here on Central Florida Public Media.
You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Libraries are part of the school experience. It's one that some people may take for granted. In some schools, they're starting to fade. Fewer paid staff are leaving volunteers to pick up the slack. I'm joined now by two reporters who recently wrote a story about the lack of librarians in one school district. Michaela Gray and Abe Abaraya are reporters with Oviedo Community News. Thank you both for joining us here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Let me start with the headline before we really get into this. Quote, from a Goosebumps book, Seminole County's Skeleton Crew Libraries. Michaela, let me start with you. How did you even come across this story originally?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started my internship with Oviedo Community News last July, so 2024, we were sent on a kind of scavenger hunt to get to know the area. And in the process, we were creating a local guide for little free libraries. But essentially, I stopped at one of the little free libraries to find out why it was created. This one was at Latin Child's Middle School. And I was able to sit down with the principal, and she told me that the reason the library started was due to the COVID-19 quarantine and how it just was offering students easier access to books. But along with that, it's still open and fully functioning during the school year because their library is closed most of the time. And that kind of sparked something in my brain because I was like, is this kind of a normal thing? And I asked if this was something that she had seen in other schools in Seminole County, to which she told me, yes, she's seen multiple schools, both elementary and middle and some high schools that don't really have librarians or media specialists in the media center during the day. So oftentimes they're kind of either closed or operated through volunteers. But if there's no volunteers, they're not open. And so kind of got me thinking, and I went to my editor and I said, hey, this is kind of weird, is it not? And we started investigating it from there, and here we are a year later.
Let me ask you more about those little free local libraries you were talking about. You've done some reporting tracking them. What did that reporting show you?
Throughout really the entire United States, and actually it's international as well, little free libraries are essentially kind of a nonprofit where people just set up their own book exchange box. A lot of people have it in neighborhoods, by schools, by parks, a lot of local public areas. And it's essentially just a book exchange drive. So you bring a book, you can also take a book, but it really is just there to support and foster resources for any age group of just reading and having that free availability to read books. I've seen like a wide range of why people create them and why they feel the need to share it with their community. But it's anywhere from a tribute to somebody all the way up until just their love for education and for reading. So yeah, through discovering these little free libraries and what they do for the community, it also kind of reminded me the importance of physical books and reading and education in the community.
Another question for you about what you found. You put in a public records request to see how many people are paid to work in libraries in Seminole County Public Schools. Tell me what you discovered.
We had a records request in the works from I believe, last September up until June of 2025. And so what we were able to find is that out of the 58 public schools in Seminole County, only 17 have paid employees in the media center full time. And of those staff members, they're either media paraprofessionals or media specialists. So out of all of Seminole County's schools, there was actually just one librarian. And I believe that was in Haggerty High School. So we kind of found that it is a scarce and kind of rare commodity to have any type of media specialist in media centers or libraries. And a lot of the requests inform me of, as well as just the breakdown of who controls what in the libraries, how things are sorted, how they're distributed, what books and supplies and materials that media centers work with, and all that good stuff.
Just from my understanding, thinking about this, how does that compare to other school districts?
For a neighboring community in Orange County, they have about 213 public schools. And out of those schools, 205 of them actually have a media specialist. So in comparison, I would say they're supported a lot in that regard. And even if they don't have a designated person in the media center, I was informed by Orange County Public Schools media relations specialists that they will always have an individual there supported by the district staff to have the media centers operating and running at all times for students.
Okay, so then what does it mean for a school to not have a librarian or a media specialist?
Really, it kind of just limits students' access. I think if the media center isn't open at a certain part of the day, maybe that's a specific student needed to go and find a book, find a resource, find a material, or just talk to somebody. What I found through a lot of my interviews with people is that students kind of use it as a safe space, the media center, to kind of just like escape from what can be hectic throughout the school day. You know, it kind of offers just a place of quiet, and also having the media specialist there, somebody, a physical person to talk to about what they're reading or how their day is going. That's been a really impactful resource for students. And I think not having that has definitely made an impact not only for students, but for their families.
We're speaking with Abe Abaraya and Michaela Gray, two reporters with Oviedo Community News who wrote a story about Seminole County Public Schools Skeleton Crew Libraries. Abe Abaraya, I want to bring you into this conversation now. Why is this happening?
The short version is money. So when you look back and you kind of take a step back and look at enrollment at Seminole County Public Schools, like many of the school districts in the area, they've been seeing a declining enrollment, mostly because the state has had these publicly funded voucher programs that have been expanded in the last few years. And as a result, we're seeing fewer students who are enrolled in public schools. So when you see the loss of students, you see a loss of money from the state. And, just in Seminole County alone, they were looking at this year, it was almost $17 million deficit that they had to overcome. So when you're looking at, a deficit like that, when I talked to the school board, they basically said, look, we're not going to get into the business of dictating you need to have X, Y, and Z at your school. They kind of want to keep it at the top level and say, hey, you're the principal of your school. You know what's best for your students. So here's your budget. You can kind of figure out what's going on with it and where you need to cut. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is, when they've had these cuts over the last few years, one of the places that they have pulled into and cut from is in the libraries. And so you're seeing where, essentially now, in a lot of places like we were talking about, it's open when there are parent volunteers who are able to kind of staff it and sort of supplement it. It's open when they're able to have someone else who's able to maybe that person normally is clerical or works over in the clinic, but they're able to maybe have it open for 20 minutes during lunch 1 or 2 days a week. And instead, most of the times when they're open, when they don't have a librarian or a media paraprofessional on staff full time, teachers are bringing their classrooms to the library and they're sort of acting in that capacity at that time. But it's not quite the same as having just a library that you can go to at any given time and, kind of those things that we all kind of remember growing up, at least for me.
You were recently at Tuscaloosa Middle School in Oviedo, and the library was open in the morning. Sounds like that might be how the school was able to do that.
Absolutely. This is a parent-run volunteer situation. When I was there, it was 3 PTSA volunteers who were there staffing it, and they're able to do it 2 days a week in the mornings for about 20 minutes. And it was kind of interesting, you're at the school and all the students kind of gather outside of it, waiting for the doors to open. The bell opens, they open the door, everyone kind of crushes students come in. Most of them are heading off. It's kind of an open school. They're heading to the courtyard and they're kind of doing the normal middle school thing. They're talking to their friends. They're going to get breakfast, that kind of thing. But they had a sign out there when I was there said, hey, the library is open. They had announced it on the morning announcements a few days prior, so more people knew about it. And, you did see people start kind of peeling off from that crowd and going in there. And it was kind of heartwarming because I was there and I was like, okay, you know what? I wasn't sure what it was going to be like. And yeah, it's a library. They're playing Uno, they're playing games, they're doing things like that, and they're chatting with their friends. It's getting loud. They have to yell at everyone, hey, we're in a library, calm it down. But it was really nice because there were a lot of kids there who were actually lining up. They were getting comic books, they were getting regular books. There was someone there who was like, hey, can we get a request in for The Summer I Turned Pretty, the book that the streaming show is based off of.
I want to know more about the voices that you encountered. What did you hear from the students there or the parent volunteers?
One of the students, told one of the PTSA volunteers, kind of walked by and was like, hey, we have a library? I didn't know we had a library, because last year, the year prior, it was basically mostly closed. And so a lot of the students, the PTSA volunteers as well, were just kind of like, when we heard that the library was closed because of this, it just, kind of broke our hearts. We wanted to go ahead and kind of pitch in. That's where we got that line about it being basically like a Goosebumps book, the empty library, the haunted library kind of a thing. And so just talking to him, there was a lot of camaraderie between the PTSA and the school administration. And I think that's something that you may not see in every school, depending on what kind of PTSA you've got, what the school administration's like. There's just a lot of dynamics that may not be in place. So it does kind of bring in this question, what we were talking about editorially as well, is just, this is great that this school is able to do it a couple days a week. They're trying to bring in grandparents and more volunteers. They want to get it to 5 days a week. They can have it open every morning. You can come into the library. But that situation is not going to play out like that at every school in Seminole County or in other school districts across the area that are also seeing, similar drops in librarians and media paraprofessionals.
Also, a lot of people may think that because we are increasingly becoming a more digital world, students might not want access to a media center at all times, when really what I've discovered through my reporting is that's not the case. Is students are still looking for that space to go, regardless of whether they check out a physical book or whether they really want to enjoy the space and those who are volunteering there.
Do you see this as a very local issue or part of something bigger?
From some of the research that I've seen at the national level, this is definitely not a unique situation to Central Florida. So during COVID, there was a spike where you had almost 10% or maybe more of school districts in Florida that had no librarian, no FTE equivalent. That started to drop off after the pandemic, but 23, 24, which was the most recent year that I was able to see some of the data on this, it started to spike back up again in Florida. So I think what we're seeing is this trend, whenever there are budget constraints or issues in some way, shape, or form, librarians and media paraprofessionals are sort of the first ones on the chopping block. Maybe they're not necessarily cut, but they might be reassigned, they might be repurposed, and then you don't sort of have that full-time librarian going. And we should say, too, it's become a lot more of a controversial role because of everything that's been happening with book bans in Florida and some of those things as well. So it is a more difficult role to fill in the current political climate that we have in Florida.
Abe Abaraya and Michaela Gray, reporters with Oviedo Community News, thank you for sharing your reporting with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, a local content producer shares how his love for theater, music, and storytelling led him to Orlando and how he hopes to pave the way for other African Americans to excel and change the world. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media.
The Wrap is a podcast from Central Florida Public Media, curating the top Central Florida news stories and in-depth reporting each week. Join me, Brendan Byrne, as I bring you news headlines, deep reporting dives, and insightful conversations from the news team. A new episode of The Wrap every Friday morning. Get it wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. When WWE's Friday Night SmackDown was in Orlando last week, it was a homecoming in a way. Some of the performers live in Central Florida. Thousands of fans filled the Kia Center downtown for that show. Orlando resident Josiah Williams got on WWE's radar with his Wrestle and Flow YouTube series, remixing entrance music with hip-hop to tell stories. He worked as an on-air announcer based at the WWE Performance Center located in Orlando. Staying authentic is at the core of the content Williams creates. He joins Engage to discuss how he brought his unique voice to storytelling in the ring and inspiring others along the way.
I had a lot of experience with, college basketball announcing, performing in different areas and different places, and it was cool. I enjoyed it. I think all of those things shaped me for who I am today. But coming into WWE, my role didn't exactly exist, so it was kind of a brand new thing. And here's this guy with hip-hop experience, with announcing experience, theater kid. What can we do? So I think WWE helped me just find my voice and kind of shape that a little bit. But because my job was both on air and behind the scenes, in front of the camera and behind the camera, I got a chance to figure out just how I wanted to tell my story and how I wanted to develop the story for others as well.
Since you're bringing up storytelling, I think some people see wrestling as just entertainment, but you brought in the story, the soul, and the sound. And you teach a class now called The Magic of Storytelling. Can you talk about just how important storytelling is to you and that space?
Yeah, I was a kid who, when I went to elementary and middle school, it was schools that were rooted in the arts and arts education. So, of course, you think about your math, science, history, et cetera, but my schools also taught art and drama and music and dance. So from the age of 3 or 4, that was a big part of my life, all the way through college, being a theater performance student and getting that degree. And so I realized over time that these things that I love and these hobbies that I have, I can turn into a profession and build a career around a lot of the things that I just enjoy doing for fun. People, like you said, they think of wrestling as a story, right? And I remember my mom would try to argue with me, like, we don't want to watch that tonight. And I'm like, well, you watch your soap operas all afternoon. And so if you can watch your thing on a continuous basis and they're telling a story over time, all these weeks, wrestling is doing the same thing. And I didn't win many arguments, but I won that one. And so I always tell people, over the span of decades, your favorite talent in the ring, they go through different changes and have new ambitions and motivations, and the stories that they tell on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, they're important and they're fun to follow.
Yeah, definitely. You don't want to interrupt mom during the stories, though.
Nah. Not at all.
You have such a unique background. Did you feel like there was a space for your voice as a black man, as a Christian, and as a hip-hop artist in the world of WWE?
I did.
Yeah.
Immediately. I think part of it was getting the stuff out there that I wanted to do for so long. I sat on the idea for years. I think probably just either because I didn't feel prepared, didn't feel ready, but seeing how the audiences of all the different wrestling backgrounds and platforms and companies would interact with the work and the music, and then seeing how people would expect it and latch onto it and feel something because of it, that's what let me know. That was the reminder that, hey, this Christian hip-hop kid from originally Milwaukee and then by way of Peoria, Illinois, could find a space. And I didn't even know if it was going to be, in WWE. I had no idea, but realizing very quickly that they saw some value in it, I said, I can do this. And it wasn't just because I wanted to. I think it's because it represented the talent and that I was telling their story and they felt connected to it. It meant something to them. So getting a message from Becky Lynch at the time when she, turned heel and realized, like, hey, this song really means something to me and it's speaking to what I'm speaking about in the ring. Those types of things made me realize there's a space here.
Wow. What's your advice to someone who has the talent, has the passion, and they're grinding? It's tough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What do you say to them?
One of the first things that we learn in WWE as an announcer is that it's not about you. And so being a content creator, we're constantly told that it is about us and that, we're supposed to be building our brand and we're supposed to be getting ourselves out there and all the attention should be on us. I think my perspective as a wrestling rapper and as an announcer was realizing that I'm putting their stories first. And so if I'm doing that and if that's my goal, then I'm not necessarily weighed down by the emotions of, okay, am I going to get the next opportunity? Is this going to advance me? You know, if I'm putting other people first, more than likely it'll give people what they're looking for, and it'll build the skills that I need. And so I would recommend to people that, yes, you know, your emotions are real, that it's going to be difficult. But in a world of professional wrestling specifically, and honestly, you know what, I'll even say any sports entertainment, if you're looking to make music, if you're looking to be an announcer, if you're looking to represent a talent in whatever skill it is, then just realize that it's not about you per se, and tell their story and find a creative way to do it that no one else can, or twist it up a little bit and shake it up a bit, and you'll be on the right path.
Do you feel like you are authentically you? Did that take a while to realize I'm going to be me and not someone else?
Yes. I think in the beginning, there was a bit of confusion because I felt like I needed to be the WWE type. Like there's a very specific sound, a very specific voice. And so I kind of struggled with that of like, am I supposed to do that thing or am I supposed to do my thing? And I realized over time, like, no, I can be myself. Of course, there's a way to do it, right? There's a training that you follow and there's a specific thing that you have to convey to the audience. So understanding that there are guidelines and expectations, but you can be you within that, and your personality can shine. And it took a little while, and especially going live, right? There was a difference between things that were taped that you can redo and that you can give that second try. But when you're live, that's it. You get that one. You know, I had a lot of moments where I struggled with that, but over time I saw, okay, I can naturally be me. 1, 2, everybody fails at some point. A lot of my favorite talent forget a line in the ring or forget where they were going with the conversation, you know, things like that. It happens. What you do next is what really tells and separates you from the others. So, yeah, it was difficult, but I figured it out.
Yeah, how you recover, for sure.
Yeah.
For our audience who has never watched a day of wrestling in their lives, is there something you wish more people understood about it?
I would wish that people understood that they're humans that are being represented in these rings, right? Everybody represents a character, but they are human beings at the end of the day. And so see them for that. See that they are putting on a different face and telling a different story. And sometimes they are speaking directly from the heart. And you can kind of tell in those moments where, hey, this is more than just a character saying a line. This is something that speaks to this woman or this man specifically. You know, I think there's a lot of that. And then also just to appreciate the creativity that they're providing. It's very, very special to see someone have this idea and to be able to bring it to life either in a live setting or on TV, whatever it is. These are creative folks, and they're excited to share what's been on their minds and in their hearts for so long. And so give them that support, give them that chance.
And what do you hope people take away from your journey, your story?
That is possible. By sharing my creativity and my journey and my story online, it opened the doors for professional wrestling in many ways, and other industries as well. And that's the power of social media, but it all depends on what you do with it and how you choose to represent yourself, how you choose to uplift others. And that was always my thing, you know. For a while, and I think even still today, WWE pushed family-friendly content. That was kind of the shift over the last couple of decades. And I'm like, well, that's literally everything that I do within my music. I want people, whether you're age 3 or 103, I want you to be able to identify with something. And so I think if you have a specific goal, you know, whether it's wrestling or not, but you want to elevate that and be able to be represented by a larger entity, you can do that. And social media is a great platform to tell your story and to tell other people's story as well.
Hey, boy, watch out. Step into me and it's saying it's all on your time and ain't nothing but a cop-out. Hey, how many wrestlers trying to get to the boy, but they keep getting boxed out. Look like I'm dropping.
That's all for this week's edition of Engage. We want to hear from you and share your voice on Engage. Next week marks 1 year since Hurricane Milton made landfall in Florida. Tell us your story of how you experienced the storm or whether you're still dealing with the fallout, so we can share how it impacted your community. Send an email to engage@cfpublic.org. I'm Sharon Stone. Thank you for the company. All Things Considered is coming up following NPR News.
You just a man I've been dying to see. You say that what you've been doing is all for the people, but you ain't inspiring me. No. Look at our records and let's take it one-on-one with all that I have achieved. They call me the Iron Survivor. They call you the guy that's been simply depriving the scene. I'm the poster face and no debates. I came around and scoped the place, and most would say that I'm the one who broke the case and walked out with anything that I chose to take. Face to face with 15 in the malice. Your defense is good, but I'm beating your average. The king ain't in need of a key to the palace. This Maverick will start over Luka and Dallas. They want me to stop what I'm doing. They know with me around, they little spot I get ruined. Wow. Crazy, I got that influence, and look, this ain't me thinking too deep. Most of you wrestlers not really unique. Love when they say they possessing a dog. I show up to work and just pull on a leash. Not so concerned with just keeping the peace, but if I did what I want, my agreement will breach. Maybe it's good that